Okay, well, everybody, welcome back to the Sync Up Conference here at the George and Joyce Wein Jazz and Heritage Center in the Treme neighborhood in New Orleans. And I am very excited about this next panel. As you can see, we have a much larger group of people this time, and that's because it takes an army to, to accomplish what has happened in the past couple of years with a performing artist by the name of Sturgill Simpson, who maybe some of you saw perform yesterday at the New Orleans Jazz and Heritage Festival. Anybody here see that show? Truly outstanding. Well, first let me introduce the folks that we have on the panel, and starting with Paul Fenn, who is with the Asgard Agency, which is a booking agency that represents Sturgill Simpson in Europe and any other territories, just Europe. To his left is Mark Dottori, who is Sturgill Simpson's manager, and Asha Goodman with Saxon Company, which is the publicity firm that has been handling the publicity for Sturgill for how long now?
I think it was October 2013.
Okay. And finally, Jonathan Levine with the Paradigm Agency based in Nashville, who is the one of, I guess, several booking agents representing Sturgill in North America. Or are you the primary? No, just you?
I'm the guy.
You're the guy. Okay. So you're the man for Sturgill in North America. Any other territories besides North America that?
It's worldwide outside of Europe that Paul does.
Okay, so Paul's got Europe, you've got the rest of the world. Fantastic. Okay, great. So for folks who may not yet be familiar with Sturgill Simpson, I wanted to play a very brief video to kind of introduce you to him, and I think when you see it, you'll begin to understand why the world has responded to this guy in a just phenomenal way. And well, let's just roll the clip. It starts with a really, in my opinion anyway, pivotal appearance that Sturgill made on National Public Radio's program Tiny Desk Concerts, and it kind of gives you a window into the charm that he brings to what he does. Tony?
I'll do the one that you guys spend all the time talking about. Actually, just about every journalist so far that I've read has talked about this song, but I don't think anybody's ever really nailed down what it's actually about, so my fault for being too cryptic, I guess. It's actually all about drugs. And some other stuff, but mostly drugs, right? A long time ago. I've seen Jesus play with flames, lake of fire. I was standing here. Met the devil in Seattle, spent 9 months inside the lion's den. Met Buddha yet another time, showed me a glowing light within. But I swear that God is there every time I glare at the eyes of my best friend.
And this is the official
There's
video.
my son, it's all been done. Someday gonna wake up old and gray. Go and try and have some fun, showing warmth to everyone. Meet and greet, cheat along the way. There's a gateway in our minds that leads somewhere out there, far beyond this plane. We're reptile aliens made of light, cut you open, pull out all your pain.
Very traditional country material right there.
Tell me how you make it legal, something that I'll make an outrage. Some say you might go crazy, then again it might make you go insane. Every time I take a look inside that old fabled book, I'm blinded and reminded of pain caused by some old man in the sky. Well,
LSD, psilocybin, DMT. They all changed the way I see. Love's the only thing that ever saved my life.
So as you can see, very traditional in his approach to country lyrics. So that was Sturgill, of course. So he doing the NPR piece and then the official video and then an appearance on, I think it was The Late Show. That was Seth Meyers. In spite of all of your best efforts, Sturgill has become successful.
We did everything we could to screw it up, but it worked out.
So which one of you was the first to learn about Sturgill? Which one was the first to this party? Okay, so Mark, you're the manager. Can you just tell us the story? How did this happen?
How did this happen? Sturgill and I met about 4.5 years ago. He sent me, as you would expect, a very well-written, compact, somewhat humorous email, which got my interest. And
It all started with an email?
It all started with an email.
A cold email?
Cold call.
Are you all paying attention?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, never underestimate, a really well-written communication. I mean, it was short. I actually have it framed in my office now, along with our ticket to the Grammys hanging up there with it. But it was just kind of a thing. He'd reached out to a bunch of people. He tells me I'm the only one that responded.
Therefore, you got the gig.
Therefore, I got the gig. Yeah, as the last guy standing. So we started very organically. I was like, I'll help you. He was in a band at the time called Sunday Valley, which was just had just made a record and was getting ready to put it out. And they didn't really know what to do. They had no idea, what the next step was. So I just kind of started to help him. And we shook hands, and the deal was, look, if we can turn this into something, I want the job. But at the time, I had other clients that were keeping me very busy, and it was kind of just something I just kind of helped incubate. And we just went through the artist development process for about really 2.5 years before we really locked into kind of who he was and what the next step was.
And at what point in that 2.5 years did the band go away? Or was it even still during that time, or did that happen later?
We had gone in to cut what became High Top Mountain with Dave Cobb. And as most guys would say at that point in time, I'm going to use my band. It's going to be this way. How we're going to do it. And I think after half a day in the studio, it was very clear that his band couldn't keep up, and we needed other guys. And that was the end of the band right there. And then at that point,
was an opportune time to discover that they couldn't do that.
Yeah. Sometimes you got to walk right up to the wall and hit it before you really figure things out.
Jesus Christ.
It's okay, but it worked out fine, And Dave had an arsenal of guys in his pocket. He knew exactly what to do, and the first calls were to Pig Robbins and Robbie Turner and those kind of guys who were just phenomenal Hall of Fame players. And that record materialized out of that, and that's how the other band. And we finally made the decision it was time to go solo.
And that record was a self-financed record. Now, didn't you also help pay for some of that record?
Yes.
As the manager?
Yeah.
So you put in some of your money?
Yeah.
Boy, you are crazy.
A great deal of it, actually.
Wow.
Yeah. I became the record company along with David Macias, and we just, it was simple enough. I just got a line of credit with the bank, and we used it to pay for the record. And his dad basically said, "Hey, if this doesn't work out, I'll pay you back." And he's a man of his word, so I didn't worry about it. And we just used normal, we used somebody else's money for a little while.
As opposed to crowdfunding?
Yeah, I don't really care much for crowdfunding.
Interesting. Why not?
I just feel like if you believe in your art, you should be willing to put your money where your mouth is and get out there and do it and build it. And we built a business that we own, and we didn't have to be beholden to anybody. The crowdfunding thing is kind of like the social media thing. It opens up a lot of space for people's opinions. And when you're making art, other people's opinions don't really matter. It's like it should just be the artist's idea.
Wow, I should have you on the crowdfunding panel tomorrow.
They'll hate me.
No.
Social media people don't like me either because I don't believe much in it either, but that's a whole other thing.
Well, I was going to say, your Facebook posts really suck.
Yeah, I know. They're awful.
No, just kidding. You guys are very effective on social media.
Thanks.
So, was Jonathan the next one on the team at that point?
Yes.
So there is a wonderful story
Yes.
About how you guys met at a Sturgill show. Which one of you wants to tell the story?
I'll tell it. So
I had relocated from our Monterey, California office to Nashville. This is just about 3 years ago, I guess, at this point. I'm a part of a live music collective that's called Communion that was started in the UK by Ben Lovett from Mumford & Sons, and we run monthly shows in now 12 different markets in America. And we were just starting to do them in Nashville at the Basement. And part of the Communion collective is to represent a very safe harbor for artists to have a place to go play shows that is not tied up with somebody clicking the door saying, I'm here to see Mark or Asha or Paul, and getting into any of the sometimes competition that happens in Showcase or the fertile grounds, the fertile grounds where artists are trying to establish a foothold. And in a place where there's no Jägermeister signs and Ticketmaster fees and whatnot, just a safe harbor for artists. And we typically do 5 acts per, this is outside of my regular job, which is working as an agent for Paradigm. But we typically have 5 acts per show, and at the Basement in Nashville, we ran them on Thursday night. And on Tuesday of that week, I got a call from a friend of mine in New York asking if I could do her a favor to put somebody on the bill for Thursday's show 2 days later. And I said, the bill's set, but this is what Communion's for. And so it's, I think it was an 8 o'clock show time, 7 o'clock doors. I said, we can put them on at 7:30 as long as it doesn't affect the other artists. Let's go do it. And then I had just the good fortune, as Mark did with an email, of going to the Basement and talking to this man right there, the good-looking one with the beard, in the parking lot. And I literally heard that voice coming from the inside of the club during the start of the first song. And I said to David, I have got to get in there, whatever that is.
You go ahead and finish this.
And I went in,
inside.
and I've done this 30 years. And Mark and I talk about this all the time. You know, we have collective 60 years between us. And certainly I feel that I've been privileged to be a part of some extraordinary artist careers and journeys. I've never been hit like that before. And also the folks that know me know that I'm very low key. That's just my style. And when Sturgill finished the show, I didn't walk up to the stage. I walked onto the stage, and I had a business card in my hand, which is also completely unlike me. I mean, it was like anything you would expect from a Jerry Maguire or from, something like that. And I said, Sturgill, my name's Jonathan Levine. I run the Nashville office for the Paradigm Talent Agency, but I also host Communion. Thank you for being here. And I just want to say that you are the reason I do what I do every day. And Sturgill, if you know Sturgill, is a little, he was like a little, I wasn't in his face, but he was a little, he's coiling his guitar cable or doing whatever, and he's like, thanks a lot, man, I really appreciate it. And he took the card, he was very gracious, as he is, and I stepped off the stage, and in essence, I texted what I had just said to Sturgill to my friend in New York, who asked me to put him on the show. And 5 minutes later, I walked out onto the landing of the Basement, and as I walked outside, I heard somebody reading out loud the text, saying, check this out, from Jonathan Levine. I guess he was at the show, and the person's reading my text, and I walked up to him, and I said, are you Sturgill's manager? And he said, yeah. Are you Jonathan Levine? And I said, yes. And that's where Mark and I first met, and we talked out there for a few minutes, and Sturgill came out a few minutes later, and we all had a chuckle over it, and the next morning they came up to my office, and we started a blueprint that day, and we have not varied once off of that blueprint, and now it's just an unbelievably glorious experience with one of the most authentic artists that I've ever come across.
As we're talking about the timeline, Jonathan mentioned David over there, and
David Macias from 30 Tigers.
And David's going to speak here next, I guess, right? You're up here. But I feel like I have to say, when you're talking about the team building, the very first person I played the Sunday Valley record for was David, who got it. And David would come to shows pretty regularly as we were taking Sunday Valley around Nashville and just kind of trying to figure out what to do next. And just about anything, he was that team member that was waiting in the wings. And when it came time, 30 Tigers was the company that made the most sense for us to work with, that got us going. So that's a team member that's not up here, but I feel like is very important to the chronology of this whole thing.
Absolutely true, but he's going to have his own moment in the sun.
Yeah, he's
so.
like that.
So, well, just as long as we're on the subject, can you just briefly explain why you felt that 30 Tigers was the right way to go?
I'd done a record with, I'd known David a long time, like from the time he started his company. We had meetings like at the very beginning, and I managed a lady named Kathy Mattea. I've been with Kathy well over 20 years, and we did a record called Coal that Marty Stewart produced, who was a client at the time. And David and I worked together on that record and putting it out, and it was just a great experience. I mean, it was just like I had total control over things. It puts you, I like the way their system is set up because it kind of puts the manager in the hot seat as the record label. You got nobody to blame, you know. You got to get in there and do your job. And
Gino, you vouch for that?
yeah, I mean, you know, there's no hiding, you know. It's like you're it. And but it also allows you to stay with the record longer, you know what I mean? Where record companies will sometimes tend to move on, and you've got to really fight to keep everything going and keep the momentum happening. It's really up to you. And so just as long as you want to stay behind that plow and work it, is how long that record's going to get worked. So that's why I liked it.
So, Jonathan, you said a second ago, and I do want to bring Asha and Paul into this conversation, but let's just do it chronologically because that seems to be kind of where we're heading with this. You said that in that very first meeting in your office, you set the blueprint and that you haven't deviated from it. Can you explain kind of what the pieces of that blueprint were?
Has everybody in here signed an NDA? The blueprint to me was simple. I mean, artist development's artist development. It's not driven by any specific genre. When you're trying to build a career for somebody, to me the best way that works, and maybe it's self-serving to say it because I've spent 30 years having one job working in the live music business, is if you're that great live, and if that experience that I had at the basement was that as powerful as it was, and it was, then the blueprint is how to build on that without ever compromising the integrity of Sturgill or his music, and without putting him in places that he need not be. And part of that plan, which to me always the simplicity of it is building by headlining and taking when needed various aspects that come into the flow of building a solid headline foundation. I mean, to me, the only part of an artist's career that they can really, truly control is stepping on a stage and performing. They can never control if somebody's going to write about them, if somebody's going to play their music, if somebody's going to buy their music. But if you're great live and you can connect with an audience, it may not be at Bridgestone Arena. It may be the basement. It may be Roberts on Lower Broadway. It may be whatever. But, I mean, that's what great acts do. And the reality is, of course, there's millions of them trying for this. And so to get through the clutter is hard, and that's why I think, you know, we always have to be selective about the commitments you make, because you're either all in or you're not. It's not a half-ass kind of gig.
So it wasn't about, can we get him opening on a Marty Stewart tour?
No, I mean, to me, you know, those things, there's a lot of emphasis put on that in our business, and sometimes rightfully so. Sometimes you need a taller rooftop to scream your message from. And again, that could come from packages, support slots, festivals, soft ticket environments, things like that give you a slightly taller perch. But if it's not in the forethought of how that funnels back into the headline base, how that artist can control their own destiny by standing on a stage that we choose, with a ticket price that we choose, on a night that we choose, with a promoter that we choose, on a bill that we choose, as opposed to 20 minutes or 30 minutes on somebody else's something. Not that those are necessarily all bad, but the way Mark and I talk about this all the time is that we're in no hurry to do this with Sturgill. We're not looking for shortcuts. We're looking for long cuts. We're looking to really build something. Sturgill's not going away anytime soon. Just a quick example of that is last fall, we had an offer from the ACL Festival in Austin to play, and it was okay. It was respectable, and they were incensed that we passed on the offer. And I said, look, is the festival not going to be around in 2015? And they said, no, of course it will be. I said, well, Sturgill will too, and he'll be here in 2016 and 17 and 18. And like with anything in life and in our business, timing is everything. And we elected to wait last year to play it this year, and I can tell you that the situation he's got and the stage that he's got and the time and slot that he has is extraordinary this year. And at the same time, part of that blueprint that we set out, which we're still sticking with, is another example. This year we've had close to, if not more than 50 major festival offers in America, which again, a lot of acts and a lot of managers and a lot of agents would love to have that opportunity. We don't have a shotgun when we come to work. It's a sniper rifle is how I look at it. We've taken 14 festivals. That's it. It's not about a cash grab. It's not about striking while the iron's hot. It's about truly building something for a hardworking, unbelievably talented artist that's going to be around for decades to come. That was the blueprint that we talked about that day.
We took 14 out of over 50 offers this year.
So who was next at the table? Paul was the next in line here?
I'll tell a little story, and then I'll let Paul tell his story. So I kept bugging Paul about Sturgill for a while, and he's like, it's too country, it won't work. Too country, it won't work.
Paul, that's what you were saying? Because
So-
you're saying that there's not a market for
No,
country.
no, it's not.
That's another 1 hour panel. That.
Yeah. But I kept after him, and finally it was Americana Fest was coming up in
September 2013.
13, yeah. And I sent him an email, and I said, I will drive you. I will buy you dinner. I will get pretty girls to show up and hold your hand. You have to come to the show. I don't care what it takes. Just be at the show. And if you don't like it, I'll never bug you about it again. The show ended, and I walked up, and I looked at him, and he said, I'm in. I get it. That was pretty much it. And that's the thing with the Sturgill deal is you just let him do his thing. But from that point, I'll let you take it.
And so if your concern at the beginning was that it's too country, it's not going to work in Europe, what happened? What changed your mind?
There was one particular element which is in that week. 30 Tigers weren't.
Hold the mic a little
Yeah,
closer.
30 Tigers weren't involved for Europe, and that was your decision.
We didn't have a real plan, really.
There wasn't a plan for Europe, and Loose Records were in Nashville at the same time, and they were turning up. They came down to the basement as well, didn't they? Tom was there.
Put us on a showcase as well.
They have a very hip label, so we had another element coming in here. We had the talent of Sturgill, plus the fact it was going to come out on Loose Records, and
It was going to come out in Europe.
in Europe.
Okay.
And also my involvement at that point, it wasn't going to be as much of a commitment as Jonathan having to fill up 365 days of the year. We're going to throw the stone in the water and see what happened. But we knew that we had some talent there to start with. We had a record coming out on Loose. And this was in September. We were talking about a plan around that point, what we were going to do. And the way the timeline was, I knew that I had access to money from Glasgow's Celtic Connections, which runs the last 3 weeks of January. I got them to fund the first visit over. So we had a visit that was going to be Sturgill playing solo for a paid show in Glasgow, or 2 paid shows we did then. And then we brought him into London to do a showcase. And that was how we started it all off. And you could see then, the buzz built very quickly from
Very
that point.
gingerly setting the toe in the
Yeah.
water. Yeah.
We did 4 or 5 trips in
Well,
2014.
Mark's the manager, but he doesn't know everything. It's 6 shows. Sorry, it was 6 tours. If you want to look at this, 6 visits last year, a
why I
total
have
of
you.
36 shows, which was a commitment from an artist I've never seen before, and I don't very much doubt we'll see again.
You
And
mean
it's
willing
paid
to
off. It's paid off.
that level of work that he was willing to, because
This was in the
touring
days
is a
when
grind. I mean,
he would say to me, Sturgill doesn't need days off. I mean, he's
Yeah, that's
going to
changed.
forget all this now.
That's
No
changed.
days off. Bring him over,
Yeah.
and we just anything that looked interesting that would develop the career. And then we took some support spots with Laura Cantrell in February. So I mean, he was in Europe in January. He was back again in February, May, June, July.
how many
and
times did he
September.
come over as a
Actually,
solo
Six-
artist?
6 trips. The first 5 were all solo. The 6th one was with the band.
We had Sturgill and I talked a lot about Europe from the beginning, just that it felt like something that was important to the career, and that because of how narrow country music is in the United States, that if we gave it an international flavor, if we went to Europe, that there would be some buy-in. At least that was our thoughts. And I'd done a lot of work with Paul over the years, so I kind of knew the marketplace. I knew that there would be that openness to in a small group. And we were kind of we were setting up Metamodern, and
Well, remember, you tell the full story. You didn't tell Loose that Metamodern
No.
existed. So Loose bought into a deal with an album in January, and then they turn up in January for the first visit, and by the way, there's another album coming in 3 months' time.
Poor
which
Tom.
didn't go down too well at the time.
Oh, it was fine. He hyperventilated a little bit, but he was okay with it.
On a
But-
different label, you mean?
No, on the same
With
label.
Loose.
but-
It was like, no, congratulations, you actually have 2 labels. It's twins.
So
It's like, hey, guess what?
as long as we're talking about the booking aspect, let me just ask one more quick question on this. So, I mean, we know that Sturgill's tour schedule over the past 18 months or whatever has been like nonstop. He's been on this constant bus ride. And now he's playing large venues, selling out really nice theaters, playing major festivals. But at the beginning, it had to have been really small capacity rooms. I mean, what kind of...
We were in a van playing for 20 people, but Jonathan, you know, when we had High Top Mountain, was his first record, and before Asha came in, before there was really any real buzz, we put a national tour together, and it was all little clubs all around the country. There's a circuit of all these great little bars, and they went out and pounded every one of them.
And how hard was that to get him into these rooms that he'd never been into, states that he'd never touched? I mean, how hard was it to, I mean, did you have to leverage relationships, trust me on this one kind of thing, or were the clubs just interested?
It's just, it's, without sounding redundant, it's just the process of doing what we do and doing it with a purpose and making sure that every gig had a purpose, had a reason. It wasn't just filling up spaces on a calendar. Every show, I'll continue to use the analogy of a sniper rifle versus a shotgun. We weren't just blasting dates out there. We were playing very specific shows in specific rooms.
Specific markets.
And again, building a foundation. And you know, that hasn't changed.
Can you give one example of a market or a room that you felt was strategically important?
Well, I think it may be a different way to say it as opposed to getting into a specific example, because one of the things too that we all talk about and that Asha is just, you know, so keenly focused on, and I know Paul the same thing over in Europe, is that clutter that I mentioned of the million acts who are trying to get their foothold. It's so hard to break through that. And it's so unusual and rare to have that happen, as is happening with Sturgill, without a driver that's attached to radio, let's say, or some other outside entity. The thing that's driving Sturgill's momentum is the power of his music in a live show and great press and word of mouth. And that there can be no better way to help set a foundation for somebody. He's never going to be known as, oh, the guy with that song. That's the song I heard on the radio. We get airplay, you know, not a lot, I think, which is not a bad thing at this stage, you know, because again, the word that we use all the time is discovery. This is a discovery process. And if you're ever able to be one of those lucky few that somehow break through, you only break once. And what's happening with him right now is he's breaking, but he's breaking in the most organic and authentic way. And so that long cut that I talk about goes back to whether it was early dates on the High Top Mountain cycle or early dates on the Metamodern cycle. When we played Nashville on February 28th and March 1st of this year, just a couple of months ago, we played 2 nights at 3rd and Lindsley. The first show literally sold out in 3 minutes. 3 minutes. The second show went right after that. And people were looking at us like we should have our heads examined, saying, why aren't you playing something bigger? We clearly could have done Ryman Auditorium. Clearly. There's no question. But he hadn't done that level yet in Nashville. And again, this is the long cut, not the short cut. We can't skip steps. So playing those shows, there's 650 people per show that get in. And the joke that we talk about is I want 2,000 people years from now saying, I was there that night. Just like the 1 million people that claim they were at Woodstock in 1969 of the 350,000 that were there. You know, that's that process of people discovering, saying, holy shit, I was at that room that night. I remember that night. And now fast forward, this fall, we're going to play 3 nights at Ryman Auditorium. So that's more of a specific example. We played the Bowery Ballroom and Music Hall of Williamsburg in New York for a $20 ticket when we could have been playing for $35 or $40 in a 3,000 capacity room. You know, if people are saying we want to leave money on the table, fine. That's their business. Our business is being the guarders and the guard and the keepers of all things good for Sturgill. So we played those 2 shows. They blew out. We'll come back this fall and play the Beacon Theater. That's artist development, and that's how you...
So purposely doing smaller rooms than you can sell as a strategy towards organically building the artist's trajectory. Is that
and creating demand. And so letting that discovery process, because while the
because
fans...
most people would have just taken the 3,000 and the money.
But while the fans are discovering this, so too is Sturgill and his band getting up to speed. You know, the boys and me are working on the sound. I mean, that, you know, they're
Yes,
still
that line's
becoming,
critical.
you know, they're still becoming their own entity, a living, breathing organism. So again, as opposed to forcing your child, not that this is a great analogy, but to go sprint when they first got to learn how to walk, and, you know, not that Sturgill, the guy's masterful, but I'm just saying that when it comes to building that base, if we're not in a hurry, and it all comes from Sturgill. I mean, if, you know, sometimes artists say, no, I'm more, you know, putting the pressure on people to do things and try and fast track, that certainly happens in our business. The fact that we're so privileged to work with somebody who allows us to do this and to keep the vision alive without compromising it and without trying to fast track or look for those shortcuts is part of the magic of the story.
Right. Asha has been extremely patient. Well,
She's a quiet person.
her work speaks for itself.
Powerful.
So I would argue that publicity has been an absolutely essential part of Sturgill's rise and what has helped to create the demand. And if you could talk a little bit about your idea for where the right media outlets were, because he's a different kind of country artist. I mean, as we saw in that clip from NPR, he's not the same country artist as Aaron Watson. He is not singing about tradition. He may sound traditional. People may say he sounds like Merle Haggard, but he's singing about very different things and expressing himself in a very different way. And can you just kind of talk about, the television in and of itself, making all those TV appearances has been huge for this year, but what did you want to do first?
Well, I think it was probably after the fourth person told me to check out Sturgill Simpson that I finally, I think actually it was his attorney, John Strom, who I've worked with for many years, made an introduction to Mark. Mark came over, we had a meeting. It seemed to instantly kind of click. And then Sturgill came over, and yeah. So that, the rest is history, I guess.
So you
But-
heard about him, you knew that there was this buzz about him.
Yeah, and it was kind of at the end of High Top Mountain, and there had been some nice organic press, but the minute I kind of stepped in, it was immediate. It was a show at Hill Country Barbecue in New York City that the New York Times reviewed. You know, that kind of level of recognition immediately.
Were you on board as a publicist at that point?
Yes.
So
That
did
was
you
the first
get the
thing.
Times
That
to
was-
come out?
Yeah, that was the first. But I'm not going to say it's easy, but with someone like Sturgill, it makes my job easier. Of course, the relationships that I have, we are in a position to make incredible things happen when an artist is as special as Sturgill. You can't really. There is no spin, you know. I'm just telling the story of Sturgill. I'm getting the music heard. People are reacting, and that is very organic. I mean, we really, our strategy from the beginning was just to find the love. And luckily, everybody loves Sturgill. It doesn't matter if you're, you know, Pitchfork or Stereo Gum to Country Weekly and, you know, or Rolling Stone proper, not Rolling Stone Country. I mean, having those people on board at a really early time kind of, I think the biggest compliment to any of us is when someone says, I don't like country music, but I love Sturgill. You know, I mean, there is no doubt that Sturgill is a country artist. It's in the name of his album, and we all think, we all feel very strongly that it deserves recognition in the country category. But at the same time, that doesn't mean that we are not going to accept love from media of all sorts.
Well, my own experience, if I may, was I was one of those people who had never heard of Sturgill Simpson until the Americana Awards last October, right? September. And I had the opportunity to go up there, and he won the award for Best Emerging Artist. I was like, who the hell is this guy? I had literally never heard of him.
You were late then.
I was very late, right? Admittedly so. And had the opportunity to go see him at his show that night at the City Winery, and was blown away from the first couple of bars just because of his voice and the band, and they were so strong. And then they bust into this hardcore bluegrass picking, and I was like, wow, and they can really play. And that was unbelievable. And so I walked out of there a fan. Next morning, I start looking him up and trying to read everything that I could about him. And fortunately, there were tons of interviews that I could read. And he had this incredible story of being a kid from Kentucky and working on the rail yards and going out to California and working on the rail yards. And then he screwed up and took a management job. And then his wife said, screw it, let's go to Nashville and really try to make this. So his story is totally appealing.
The story always helps.
Yeah.
It always helps to have a story that's engaging and to have someone that's well-spoken. I mean, I think what also is really helpful for all of us is that Sturgill is not 20 years old. Not that there's anything wrong with artists that are 20 years old. That's great. But Sturgill is an adult. He has life experiences, and he knows what he wants. I can put him in front of any situation, and I know that he's going to hit it out of the park. In the same way that we're patient with rooms that he's played. I mean, yes, he's played, I think, 7 television performances now, but that has been over the course of, the past year and a half, It was first, obviously, Letterman took a chance on him, but the conversations from there were very natural. It was, after that it was Conan, after that it was The Tonight Show, and it was all kind of several months, in between. We weren't trying to capitalize and squeeze every single thing into,
1 week. You
1
weren't on
week.
Letterman one night and Conan the next.
Exactly.
And those experiences also really help Jonathan in his job, because he gets on national TV, and all of a sudden it probably makes those phone calls a little bit easier for you to make.
Yeah, I mean, again, Sturgill makes it easy for us to do what we do, but what we do is not easy. Again, there's a real method to it, and what Asha's talking about and what we're all doing is still going to focus back to that blueprint in the first conversation we had.
And how much of your work was made easier by the fact that Sturgill elected to make a record that closes with this bizarre psychedelic, trippy funk track and references illicit drugs throughout the record? I mean, didn't that kind of help get this guy some different type of attention?
I don't come from a traditional country background, so when Mark and Sturgill decided to have Turtles be the first single, I was like, great, let's do it. I didn't bat an eye at it. I don't know why. I think that, I think from the very early time, we kind of noticed that fans were really connecting to that song. Yeah. And it was something special, and the first television performance that he performed was Life of Sin, and that's definitely probably the most kind of traditional, kind of hard-rocking, up-tempo song. And that was strategic, because at late night television, you kind of want to grab people. So that was the first introduction. That we went into Living the Dream, but then we did Turtles on The Tonight Show.
We talked about drugs on The Tonight Show.
Yeah.
And we did it on the Opry too, which really kind of surprised people.
But I think that because he was kind of edgy in that way, that it just made him a better story.
We were fortunate to have some good timing too. High Top Mountain came out, as Asha said, it had gotten some organic press, a little bit, not a lot. But Asha came in right in the fall of 2013 and immediately got to work on making sure people were aware of Sturgill, and all of a sudden we started showing up on people's top 10 lists. This record that hadn't gotten a lot of press, suddenly at the end of its cycle was showing up on top 10 lists everywhere. And then the New York Times came out, and there was this sort of momentum that was starting to build on a record that was already out. What people didn't know is we already had Metamodern in the can. It was done. And we were just picking our time for when it wanted to come out, which is kind of what happened with the UK label and why things got so compressed.
Because the point is, in Europe, the album High Top Mountain didn't get released until January.
Yeah.
So we were running several months behind.
Yeah.
So that's why we were jammed together, because obviously they couldn't delay the...
And did that hinder your work, or did it make it harder?
We didn't have a template, so we couldn't say it was harder than it was going to be. That's how it was. And in my view, having 2 albums out in 6 months, within 4 months, was great.
That's kind of like the
It
Beatles.
was a good tool for me. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, what
that
it
was
did.
good for me. It's the poor guy at the label who invested money on a one-off deal. And shit, you've got another one you've got to get into the media, into those same media within 4 months. That was his problem, not mine.
Well, what it did for us is it became the setup for the next record. It really did. I mean, High Top Mountain was getting enough attention, and we were on his top 10 lists, and all this stuff was kind of happening, and we sensed it was like, we got to go. We got this next record, we got to go. It's time. And so we set the release for May. So the 2 records in the United States came out 11 months apart. So one came out in June of 13, and that came out in May of 14. And those two, that sort of 1-2 punch, I think, was huge for us because Asha already had awareness. She was already talking to people. There was already music out there. There was always something happening, and it became we just went from one record right into the setup of the next. And in a way, once we sat down with Tom, our UK partner, and explained that to him, he saw the value in it as well. And we started strategically deciding what are we going to wait on and what are we going to push forward. And we were very strategic about what press we took as well. So I think those two things were it was a bit of luck in our timing, but having those two things back to back and being able to go 1-2 and having something to follow up. If there's a lesson to the whole thing, it's knowing what your follow-up is going to be, having some idea of what your next steps are going to be, because music is not, it's not science, right? It's all art, and you don't exactly know when you're going to get the next thing and what your next opportunities are going to be, but being conscious of what's over the next hill helps.
It's also learning how to say no.
Yeah.
That's which is the most important word for us to keep in the arsenal. When you're getting this kind of traction and attention, and more opportunities come your way, the typical way of thinking in our business may be just to say yes, to take, and what I think we do really well as a team is say no. We passed on 17 more dates with Zach Brown Band this week, and we passed on this and that and the other, and again, those are tremendous opportunities and an honor to have them, but they don't fit in to the plan. We're rolling fine the way we are. And again, with all this talk about the strategic work and the thinking behind it, if the music sucked, we wouldn't have the opportunity to have, to think like this. But, it starts there. The music is unbelievable. When people can come and say it's my favorite record of the year, or what, all the many things that they're saying, there were, 71 publications at the year end that had him somewhere in their top 10 list, many in the top 1, 2, 3 of whether it was the record or the song or performance. And it's outstanding. So that's what's driving it. And then our job, as Sturgill joked yesterday on the bus, that he's paying Asha to say no. I think the same thing. He's paying me to say no.
We earned the right to do that. I mean, in a press perspective, we, in the beginning, with any artist, you really have to just say yes to everything.
Well, why are you saying no to stuff? Don't you want more and more and more press?
We're not saying no to everything, but what is the purpose in having his and having him, it's exhausting, for him to do interviews. We have to be cautious at this point on Sturgill's time. He needs to be focused on certain things, and doing hours of interviews every day, talking about an album that he's talked about already 1.5 million times, it's not necessarily super productive. It doesn't make him feel great, and it also, there is a mystery that is really beneficial in artists, and saying no sometimes only helps build that interest. For example, though, we did do an interview with the LA Times, which was strategically decided to do because he was the only artist to do both Coachella and Stagecoach. And we really wanted to capitalize on that and tell that story and really make it a moment. And he was on the cover of this LA Times in advance of Stagecoach when, none of the headliners were. So having those kinds of moments, really thinking about it, thinking about how to tell the story and set him apart. Because there are 1 million wonderful opportunities, and we will continue to engage press on many, many different levels. But saying
who have
yes.
you told no?
Huh?
Who have you told no? Like Good Housekeeping or 17 Magazine or Ebony or something?
I think Maxim magazine wanted to have a feature on him.
But it's just about what Asha's doing and what we're doing it's mystique left the building in our business too long ago, especially now in the new world order that we live in, where everybody can be everywhere. You know, we're keeping Sturgill he doesn't have to be everywhere. Mystique is good. There's nothing wrong with you know, even the festivals that we're playing, we're being offered, will he do this super jam, or will he sit in with X or play with Y? No, he won't. I mean, not in an arrogant way at all, just that he's going to do his thing, and we're going to continue doing, whether it's with the press or the live or the management or the label side, we're going to continue with this plan of everything that we do having a purpose. So sometimes that less is more. It still comes into you know, serving the greater good for what we're trying to build for him.
Does anybody have any questions as long as we're here? Because please come and use the microphone.
Who made the Turtles video? It was perfect expression of the song.
Two young filmmakers out of Knoxville. Graham Uleski, I think is his name, and he had a friend that worked with him. They shot it. It was made in my warehouse. I have a funky old warehouse up in Kentucky.
Is that where the distillery is?
That's where the distillery is too, but that's a whole nother story. But I'm an old lighting guy. That's kind of how I got started. I did lights for years. And I called in some friends, some favors to get the video wall behind. The whole idea of it kind of came from Sturgill's head. He wanted to this is like his general idea. And then the visuals came from a thing called Electric Sheep, which is if you just Google it, you can check it out. And all those images are made by that company, and they're all computer generated by tens of thousands of computers that are interlinked all around the web, all working together to make these images. That's why they're so detailed. So it was just a kind of a collective thing. The video actually to shoot was super simple, and we shot 4 videos in 2 days. We shot videos for 2 songs which we didn't use, but the Promise video was shot in that same session. So we did Turtles, all that in 1 day, and then the second day we did a bunch of performance stuff, and we shot the little video for the Promise. And that's all done in my office and in the warehouse building behind it and everything.
Any other questions while we're here? Yes.
By the way, we spent a whopping, I think, $3,000 on that video.
Hi, it sounds like y'all are all pretty much on the same page, but I'm wondering, there must be points in time where there are creative differences in how you apply your individual trade in the management of the artist. And I'm wondering, do those creative differences come up, and do you solve them internally among yourselves, or do you bring the artist in to try to help you transition to or come to a conclusion on these types of questions?
Well, the missing person up here is Sturgill, obviously, and he and I talk multiple times in any given day about, decisions. And ultimately, if there's a creative conversation, then it comes down to him. What does he want to do? And I think he and I are kind of cut from similar cloth. We sort of look at the world in a pretty similar way. So I have a pretty good feeling for how he's going to feel for stuff. And a lot of times, if somebody's, and it happens all the time. I mean, trust me, we get date offers, we get this offer, we get press things, UK stuff, and he and I talk about it on a constant basis. And ultimately, if there's somebody that just has to be the absolute asshole and say no, that's me.
That's your
We're
job.
all pretty in tune, though, and I think we've all earned the trust of Sturgill in a certain sense over the past year and a half. If it's something that we feel strongly about, he'll do it.
Yes.
Even if he doesn't want to do it. But it's also, you really have to decide when to pick your battles,
He seems like a super reserved, private kind of guy. He's not that gregarious glad-hander out there.
He is and he's not. I mean, he is just, I don't know how to explain him, but it's, you just want to pick your battles, you know what I mean? Like, if it's not something that you think is going to change the world, if it's just not worth fighting about.
If I go to him and say, Asha's pushing very heavily for this, or Jonathan, or Paul, and this is what we think we should be doing, and we'll have that conversation. But he will listen to the people in his team, and if Paul comes, I don't know Europe at all, really. I mean, in depth. So if Paul says, this is the place you want to be, then that's what we're going to do.
The other thing is that we can make decisions really quickly, because it is 5 people on the team, probably. You know, I mean, we do have.
We're all pretty definitive.
We do have a bigger family that is now involved in Sturgill, or will be on the next record. But you know, I can call up Mark and we can make a decision and it's done. You know, I mean, sometimes there's so many different people that need to weigh in and give their opinion, and it's just, I think, working in a team like this, it's easy, it's nice.
Question.
Hey y'all, I'm Greg Morrow, and I have a band called the Crescent City Groove. I was just wondering, so how did this team form? How did it come together? And when did he get this team, y'all? And when did the team come into play, and how did it come into play?
Well, as we've kind of covered a little bit, but basically, you know, I just saw something in Sturgill that I just really loved when we first connected. I mean, he and I connected first. And it was clearly his voice that just got me. And then over time, I got to listen to his music and hear what he had to say.
When did you
and
meet
then
him?
as we started to offer that up into the world, for the most part, people reached out to me, you know, got in touch with me and said, I want to be a part of this. And we've kind of had this constant thing of, like, with Sturgill, my joking thing about the marketing plan is, who the hell is Sturgill Simpson? You know, it's like, if I can get you to say that, then you're going to look and find more, and that
Which
just
is exactly what happens.
That's exactly what happens, and so the team came together in a very organic way, which was, we love this music, we love this guy. Can we be a part of it? And for me, my job was to weed out the ones that really couldn't do anything, and focus on the people that could, and try to do that.
All right, so we've got to go, but I do have one more question that I want to ask. So, has Sturgill already made the next record?
No.
Okay. Is it going to be a country record?
Whose definition is that?
The thing is that when he played me Meta Modern, we sat in his car, and he was like, don't be freaked out. You're going to be freaked out. And I listened to it, and I said, it's still your voice. You know what I mean? Like, he can go in so many directions, but at the end of the day, it's all grounded with his voice. That's never going to change. It's always going to be Sturgill. So,
Because the end of his show yesterday was rock. I mean, that was a rock closer. Do you anticipate him? Well, I mean, so he's like this.
he's not going to make the same record.
It was a rock closer on an Osborne Brothers song, which is 50 years old.
Which was awesome.
It's a country music
You're
song.
talking from an American perspective, where everything's in a box.
Oh, I love this. Go ahead.
That's all I'm saying. You know, every genre has a box, and it's very, very carefully defined, and you can't cross over, except occasionally, which Sturgill's managing to do. But you start off from the box.
Yes, we do.
And we don't.
Okay.
Without pigeonholing and without.
And that's why this was so important at the beginning, because there isn't as if you're a different kind of artist and you want to get some traction, you want to get some press in your press kit, you want to get some things started, go to Europe. Go to Europe. Put a backpack on your back and go work in Europe, because you will find some audience there, you will find some press, you will find some story. It's definitely a more open place to exist.
I was just going to say again, we've really worked hard to not let the pigeonholing or the box surround him. You know, we talked yesterday while he was playing that it's remarkable to see somebody in that setting as he was yesterday. He's not changing anything about what he's doing. You know, the people are coming in and discovering. It's not like he's working the crowd more, or talking more banter in between the songs. The show just keeps getting better and stronger, and then we're continuing our job of quality control, not letting a box get painted around him. Whatever the next record is whatever the next record is. Not thinking, like I said earlier, artist development shouldn't be driven by a specific label or genre. The business and the society maybe want to put that on him, and part of what's so special is that we're not really, worried or focused on that. To play Coachella and Stagecoach, that's happened 3 times, Willie Nelson and Dwight Yoakam, and so to be in that rare company is pretty incredible. And last week at Stagecoach, I was joking yesterday that when he was playing, it looked like the stage was going to flip sideways, because the entire side of the stage was every artist that I think was at Stagecoach who didn't have a place to play at that moment on a stage was standing on the side of the stage. Whether it was Merle Haggard, or it was Vince Gill and the Time Jumpers, or Casey Musgraves in the band, and newer, more contemporary country acts that were saying what real country music is for the first time, or whatever. But it was amazing and to see that. And again, that allows us to do that. He's the only artist that's playing the Firefly Festival and Big Barrel. He's the only artist playing Governor's Ball and Farnborough. We know that when you're that confident with the presentation and the art and what it's going to be, that we can do that and not have to get caught up in the label or what format or what this or that, what box. If we've got somebody who could be the next Johnny Cash or the next Bob Dylan or the next Willie Nelson or the next whatever, I mean, just the beauty of Sturgill, he's not the next anything. He's the first Sturgill. And our job is to make sure that what we do with the decisions we make allow him to continue to be the first Sturgill.
Easy for you to say.
And again, just I know it sounds redundant, but just have these decisions made with a purpose. There has to be a method to what we're doing.
Every decision, you have to ask yourself why.
But it seems like a
It's
huge
always the
part of
why
his
question.
appeal is that he comes from what seems to be such a very strong country tradition, and then yet is still so willing to be able to step outside of all those boundaries. And it's that transgression, actually, that makes him stand out and makes him interesting. And that's why I wonder whether you...
It's in the title, Meta-Modern.
Yes, it is.
I mean, it's like, look it up, kids. That's exactly what he's doing.
But, he's got a whole career ahead of him, and I'm just wondering, how many more directions can this guy go in?
Your guess is as good as mine.
All right, well, on that note, we're going to have to end this one here. But thank you all so much for giving your time and being here today. Paul Fenn from the Ask Art Agency, Mark Dottore, the manager, Asher Goodman from Saxon Company, and Jonathan Levine from the Paradigm Agency. We're going to take a 2-minute, very quick break, and then we're going to be right back with David Macias of 30 Tigers.